Record. Okay, so if anybody's in the witness protection program, now is your chance to be quiet or hide yourself or whatever. We are recording. This is the 7 Works in Progress. It is the culmination of 5 weeks of writing together in the Creative Mastery course. And we are all reading works that are not polished, are not finished, are not fully thought out, but that we, I think, are ready to share, and we'd like a little feedback. So we are each holding ourselves to a 7-minute frame. So if it's over 7 minutes, I'll raise my hand so the reader can see. And if it's over 8 minutes, I'll interrupt them. Unless they seem like they're wrapping it up, and then I'll be nice. But it's for 2 reasons. One is because it's the promise we've made to our audience, and the other is so that people take editing seriously and don't just, you know, continue to make it longer and longer instead of like really working on that 7 minutes, which makes your piece more polished and more presentable. So here we go. We're going to start tonight with Susan Koziak, who is, and I would recommend to everybody that you put the view not in Brady Bunch, but in speaker view, so that we can hear whoever is speaking will be large. I'm doing that obviously for the recording so that, you know, the speaker is large. For some reason. So Susan, unmute yourself, please, and say something. And so I know that that everything's working for you.
Thank you, Julia. I'm here.
Okay. So Susan is working on something called Take Care. And I haven't heard their writing. We've been writing together all this time. We haven't heard each other's writing. So I'm very excited to hear from Susan. Take it away.
Thank you. So first of all, I just want to thank Julia for giving us this opportunity. It was a little bit nerve-wracking for me, and I want to thank all of you for sharing your time with us because it's really helpful for us. So as a live event producer with over 30 years experience in one of the top 5 most stressful industries, right underneath military, emergency responders, and airline pilots, I'm used to navigating stressful situations and events and triaging whatever comes at me on the job. I've spent decades in personal development and growth trying to find the right tools to help me do it all with a little bit more ease and grace. But with everything I've amassed over the years to help me navigate stressful live events, I didn't realize how effective the tools could be for navigating the major life event that was thrown at all of us last year. I'll never forget the days leading up to the announcement of the Southern California lockdowns prohibiting in-person events. And in a flash, the past 33 years of my life was deemed non-essential and my income source was cut off. We were just finishing off some major home renovations that spiraled out of control after we discovered water and mold damage. And despite the snowball effect on our budget, we pushed through with the optimism that 2020 was going to be my best year yet financially. And then the calls started coming in from clients as restrictions were put in place, and one by one, everything slipped away. At first I thought, well, this is only 2 weeks, right? I had all these amazing tools that helped me manage stress and anxiety, and I knew that they could help other people too. After all, I was the Stress Less event producer. I sat down and I quickly wrote out a free ebook on how to triage and survive the COVID-19 event, hoping to help others that may not have the same tools and skill set. 2 weeks became 4, and then 6, and then my earlier suspicions that my best year yet was about to become my worst ever financially became evident, and I stopped taking my own advice. I allowed myself to get caught up in a pity party, and like many others, I laid on the couch, binge watching Netflix, incessantly scrolling through Facebook and eating comfort carbs to try to self-soothe. As a perpetual self-educating student of life, I could not let that be my year. I had prayed for more time to be able to do the things that I never seemed to have enough time to do. And this was my opportunity. After joining a Tony Robbins challenge in the summer, I got a kick in the butt that I needed to reconnect to a higher purpose. I had more to give than just events. I picked myself back up. I tore myself away from my Facebook feed, and I started moving my body and going for more walks. I started decluttering and organizing. I invested more time in myself, taking care of smaller projects that needed to be finished while thinking about how to tackle the big one. Years ago, I was in an event and I heard somebody say that everybody has a story in them. And his words were, "I forbid you to take yours to your grave." You see, I have an adorable story about how I reconnected 30 years later with the first boy that I ever kissed when I was 7 years old at summer camp. That fairy tale turned into a drama when he was diagnosed with a potentially life-ending disease just months after we were married, and then into an amazing story of transformation and healing when he recovered. Since then, I've had an insatiable hunger to continue learning while yearning not only to get our stories out to the world, but to serve and contribute on a different level, but was not quite sure how and in what format, or at least that's what I keep telling myself. With the newly found time on my hands, I was going to finally craft my message, but the heart and the mind are two different things. My heart has wanted to share all the things I know can help people for years, but my mind keeps me stuck, spinning and playing small, questioning my self-worth, hiding in plain sight and second guessing everything I write. Is it really worth sharing? Is it good enough? Will anybody even care? Even as I sat down to write what I wanted to share today, I kept reworking the same piece over and over, stuck in perfection. You see, the challenge is putting yourself out there is not as much about whether you can write or speak or deliver a message in any other manner. It's about being vulnerable, open, honest, and real. It's about facing your fears and sharing yourself, being uncomfortable and doing it anyways. It's about realizing that it's not really about you at all. It's about the people who are in pain waiting for you to step up so they too can have their own healing and transformation. So in the spirit of wanting to share with the world and make it a slightly brighter place, I sat down to think about what may serve my audience here. Writing tends to be one of the hardest methods of delivering your message. While both video and written word now live in perpetuity, for some reason, we tend to think that we have to be even more perfect when we put pen to paper, or so to speak. I think it comes from the emotional scarring of seeing red ink and feedback from childhood on, from teachers to editors, those who supposedly know more, are smarter or better than us, opining about our content and keeping us second guessing ourselves. So it's with mixed emotions that I committed to reading today, knowing that while my words may or may not be the most prolific, it was what I needed to do in order to take the next step forward for me, and hoping that perhaps something that I wrote may in turn help just one person here. We truly all do have a story in of us. Most of us probably have more than one, and somewhere out there, someone is waiting to hear them. For that one person, it may be life-changing or even life-saving, but because we're so stuck in our minds, allowing the mental chatter to keep us from sharing our knowledge and experience, they sit and they wait. There were so many things I wanted to do over the past year. Some I actually accomplished, and others, well, I wish I'd made more progress. But the time flew by, and I know that the next 5 to 10 years will too. Somehow, I have to continue to take the next step, no matter what it looks like or how much I resist, rather than living in regret over all the things I should have done. What I've come to realize is that when you try to take on healing the world, you have to heal your own world at the same time, without waiting until you figured it all out. As heart-centered people, we rarely put our self-care first. But in order to truly make a difference in the world, we have to learn, as they say on flights, to secure our oxygen mask first before assisting others. So I made a practice to develop a better self-care routine, especially in the morning, filling myself first before sitting down to pour into my writing. And it's made a huge difference. I still sat down and reworked this piece all week long, including this morning, but I'm committed to reading a work in progress, and so I did. Let my imperfect, uncomfortable action today be a model for you to take the next step when you are called, no matter how big or how small, to share what you have with the world, regardless of what stage it's in, no matter how good you think it is, and definitely do not wait for it to be perfect. It never will be. Take care of yourself first, fill your cup along the way, focus on the one person that needs to hear what you have to say today, instead of waiting to change the world tomorrow, and just take the next step. We're all just a work in progress. Thanks.
That was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. It's a little bit hard or weird because you can't hear people, but if people would like to put in the comments or unmute yourself to say something, please let Susan know what stuck in your brain, what was memorable, what was moving. Just give her that 7-word, 10-word feedback.
I loved your
or in the chat.
vulnerability, Susan.
Thank you. Another? You could say it verbally or put it in the chat for her. What stuck out? What phrase worked for you? What phrase touched you? What I loved your vulnerability too. I felt like you really delivered. Okay. Heal your world first. Yeah. That's from Diane. Okay, and you can continue to do that for Susan, and we will move on a little bit. So you can ignore me a bit, but give Susan her feedback. Perfectionism, says somebody I know, very much so. Okay, somebody asked me to check for latecomers. They do appear on my screen. I do let them in periodically, so no worries. They're not languishing in the waiting room waiting to get in. Okay, so our next reader is Sutapa Das, and Sutapa worked with us maybe was it close to a year ago, Sutapa? So she's been writing since then quite seriously. And we are now going to be hearing the second draft, she says, of a short story called The Dancing Wall. And it's just the first 1,300 words of that story. So it's a little, it might feel truncated or it's not the whole story. But I will promise you that will be gripping because I know how Sutapa writes. So I'm going to mute myself and we're going to hear from Sutapa. John, mute yourself, please, so that you will, so that Sutapa can take the center speaker's space.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Okay. Take it away, baby.
Part 1, Bren. It's hard to describe the thrill of running and leaping along the top of the dancing wall, feeling as small as ants against the backdrop of the vast black uncertainty on the other side. The trick was to always keep moving to prevent the thick glass from sucking us down into it like slow-moving quicksand. The top of the dancing wall stretched out in front of us, a wide, endless road disappearing into the horizon. The wall was said to enclose the whole of the known world. Its height fluctuated depending on the distance of the moon. When the moon hung low, the dancing wall reached tall toward it, responding to the moon's gravitational pull. At those times, the wall was at its thinnest, and the uncertainty from the other side could slip past its defenses and into our world. We learned young to recognize the warning smell of burnt electricity that filled the air seconds before the ground gave way and a pool of uncertainty bubbled up from below. An instant later, the ground reappeared as if nothing had happened, except that anything or anyone unlucky enough not to have gotten away had fallen into the void and was lost forever. Once a month, when the moon's orbit brought it close enough to the Earth, the first sightings of the uncertainty pools would begin a race by the town forecasters to predict the corridor where most of the uncertainty would appear. Of course, those of us with the best luck were expected to help the families who would be the most affected, relocating prized possessions and herding livestock away from the danger zones. But in the chaos, it was easy to slip away. And as soon as we could, we snuck through a hole in the security fence on the eastern side of town and scrambled down the rocky hillside to the dancing wall at the edge of the world. We secured our watches against our chests, carefully checking the chain that held them in place, and geared up from the hidden stash of old climbing equipment. Then came the fun of sprinting up the wall, kicking in the tips of our crampons and swinging our hooks up into the shimmering viscous glass as we climbed. At the top, we hoisted ourselves onto the sluggish glass sea, crammed our gear into our packs, and began to run. Was it just our imaginations that we too could feel the moon's gentle tug as we played so high above the Earth's surface, making us lighter, almost as if we could take off and fly away as we cavorted and chased each other? It was a reckless thing to do, but we were young and felt invincible, and we laughed in the face of danger. When weariness weighed down our limbs and the temptation to relax into the glass grew strong, we geared up and prepared to downclimb. Out of breath and giddy with euphoria, nothing could dampen our high spirits. Except I must not have properly secured my watch, for as I swung down over the edge, its chain loosened and my watch slid off my chest. I lunged towards it too late. It disappeared below. The others froze, looks of shock and incomprehension on their faces. Finally, Herna called out a warning as our hooks sank into the glass. We slid them out and climbed down in silence. Part 2, Tarsia. Did you think I wasn't brave enough to run up the dancing wall with you, Bren? Or did you forget I existed and that we'd been friends once? I hid in the shadows and watched with envy and admiration as you scaled the dancing wall with your confidence, easy laughter, and strong, graceful movements. How fearless you all were to climb so high with no safety precautions. But you could afford to be carefree in a way I couldn't. You climbed fast and soon were nothing more than tiny specks floating up against the hazy glow of the wall. Only then did I crawl out of my hiding spot. I placed my hands against the cool glass and felt the dancing wall try to suck me into itself. It was an odd sensation, almost as if the glass were alive. The dancing wall drew in everything around it, vegetation that strived to grow nearby, curious animals sniffing around its base, the movement of the wind, the sounds and smells of the surrounding landscape. I stood within that strange emptiness next to the wall and felt its siren call tug at my mind, inviting me to step inside. But I knew better. While you played above, I peered into the glass to see what would come into view. The slow, languid movement of objects suspended inside was hypnotic. The fully preserved flowers, insects, and animals, as well as objects that had been pushed inside purposely, photographs, secret notes, stuffed animals. I skipped back and forth, watching the ever-growing assortment of items continually shift toward me, as if I were a magnet. So engrossed was I in my game that I must have jumped 3 feet in the air when something zipped down from above and landed behind me. I knelt to see what it was. Glinting in the dirt, a watch, like the one I wore beneath my shirt, 2 inches in diameter with a single hand that could be spun around the open face. Instead of numbers, a network of dark lines wove around the edge, encircling the luminous gray center. At the top, the lines were smooth, delicate, and flowing. As they worked their way around to the bottom, they became increasingly uneven, jagged, and angry. I pulled out my own watch to compare the two. The fall-on watch's hand pointed to the flowing lines at the top. Not like mine. No matter how hard or how often I spun my watch's hand, it always came to rest at the bottom, where the lines were the most jagged. Sometimes when I was alone, I pushed the hand of my watch to the top and pinned it down, ignoring as long as I could the burning pressure within my chest and the despair that poured out of my watch as it struggled to return its hand to its customary position at the bottom. We were taught from an early age to guard our watches fiercely and to keep them hidden from anyone not close to us. How could a watch have fallen from the sky, especially when showing the best of futures? Did the wall mock me, bringing me what my heart desired most, knowing I could never claim it? But how could I expect anything less as someone whose watch foretold the worst life? I tentatively reached out to touch the fallen watch and glanced up the wall. Dare I? I could just make you all out at the top, beginning your descent. There was time. I unfastened my watch from the chain that looped around my neck and under my arms and slipped the fallen one into its place. I ignored the dizzying onslaught of emotions, the betrayal felt by my watch, the fear and bewilderment from the fallen watch. I blocked it all out and spun the hand of the fallen watch, imagining the good fortune it landed on, those smoothest lines at the top, to be my own. In kindergarten, we had sung songs of friendship and acceptance and learned that we should love each other no matter what our watches showed. We were taught that our watches were a beautiful, sacred part of us, but only a fragment of our full identities, that in our vigilance against the uncertainty, we were united by more than what divided us. But they lied. Our watches meant everything. Our watches evolved from a small pearl-like nub that protruded from the center of our foreheads at birth. The nubs grew as we did. By the time we were 5, they had flattened and hardened into what would become the watch backs. When the watches were half grown, they just detached from us to reveal their face in the shape of our future. The end of this part.
Beautiful.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you. So what stuck with you? What was a memorable line or a really interesting concept, either in the chat or out loud?
I liked a lot of the imagery.
Mm-hmm. Hyper vivid, somebody wrote. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that it was like a suspenseful, but also kind of like majestic and mysterious buildup. So like you weren't sure if you should be nervous or excited or like, and you painted the images so beautifully. Like that it was like you would get through one like vivid image that I was like, wow, and then it would be like another really, really beautiful one. Great job.
Yes, somebody said, I feel the intensity of the words through your voice. Yes, that's absolutely true. You delivered it with the right intensity, which is great too. Thank you, Michelle. Okay.
I loved how the origins of the watch and the significance of it was sort of slowly like revealed over the course of the reading. Like you knew from the outset it was pivotal, but exactly what it represented or where it came from or how it came to be it was like an unfolding that was really wonderfully paced and also extremely captivating.
Thank you.
Nice. I love the betrayal that she felt when her watch is finally revealed. Like, you know, everybody's merry about their future and about their mutual outcome until they see their own face, their own watch face. And that betrayal in the one character was so amazing. Okay. You guys can continue to give Sutapa some chat comments, which are wonderful. And thank you very much, Sutapa, for sharing that.
Thanks for having me.
You're absolutely welcome. Our next reader is John Honorato. And John says he's known about creativity for a long time, but not specifically about his own creativity. He signed up for this creative mastery course and has, he's happy to say it's worked. He has new insights, new understandings, and he's beginning to write. We are going to be listening to an excerpt from What Do the Flowers Say? And again, we don't know what to expect, but I love the suspense of how we each write. So let's let John take the floor.
All right. So this is a What Do the excuse me. What Do the Flowers Say is a nonfiction book that I started in the third or fourth year of our last presidential administration. It revealed some shortcomings in our ways of thinking and our ways of doing things. So I decided to address that in the best way that I know how, which is to write. And what I'm going to do right now is read the introduction to the book, which I've clearly already written. And it starts off with, "The earth laughs in flowers," which is a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. "These are strange times we live in. Traditionally, we have looked to our leaders for guidance. Yet in the current political climate, our leadership is brain dead. Not only that, it is narcissistic and short-sighted. You may be lucky enough to live in a country or state in which the leadership is useful and strong. Yet many of us, even most of us, do not. You may be lucky enough to live in a city where the mayor is providing useful guidance and information. I would be willing to warrant that many of us do not. In the absence of functional leadership, we are being called to lead ourselves. We are called to make our own choices. In this book and with these posts, I'm going to show you how to do just that. But who am I? Okay, great, I can hear you saying, who is this guy and what gives him the right to lead me? What gives him the right to give me any advice on how I should live my life? Here's my credibility. For a very long time, I was lost. For a very long time, I have not been in touch with my own personal power. I didn't even know I had any power, personal or otherwise. It started with my adoption. My biological mother, Carol, gave me life and held me once. I was then whisked into a system that didn't know much about the way humans worked and didn't care. The first year of my life was spent alone in a hospital ward, tended by overworked nurses. We know now that physical contact and affection is crucial for the proper development of babies' brains. But in 1969, it was okay to leave babies crying on their backs for hour after hour until the nurse came. Even then, it was only for a moment until she dashed off somewhere else again. In 1969, it was not known that babies had emotional and developmental needs, not just physical ones. I was paid no attention. I was paid no mind. This took away my voice. And when I moved in with my quote unquote forever family a year later, I recreated that same situation. Dad was a college professor. He seemed to always have papers to grade, a conference to go to, or a 30-mile commute to tackle. He was often not present. Mom was more of a fixture in my life, but Mom had issues. In short, she was never able to bond with me. The son she had lost just prior to me guaranteed that I was fighting a ghost to be heard. It was a battle I would not win until much, much later. Net result, I had no self-esteem. I had no foundation for it. My family didn't build it, and I was far too young to know how to do it myself. Later on, I would describe my self-esteem, or lack thereof, as crushingly bad. When I was in school, I had trouble wrapping my brain around the concept of anyone actually using the word you to refer to me. My childhood took away my voice. Then the brain injury I suffered when I was an adolescent alienated me even further. Curious? I'll talk more about that later. But I made it through. Somehow I ingested and generated enough love to pull me through the worst of it. Later on, I moved away from home and I started on my journey of recovery, but slowly. Now I consider myself an independent spirit. I've been that way as far back as I can recall. Even though I was depressed, even though I felt terribly lonely, even though I wallowed in despair and darkness, even though my voice was taken away from me, I still heard it. Even if only in the confines of my own head, I still heard it. I've always had my own ideas about things and my own opinions. Just because I couldn't share them doesn't mean I didn't have them. So what are we doing here? It's simple, super simple. We're waking the world up to love. We're waking the world up to itself. Yeah, there's lots of bad stuff happening in the world right now. These issues need to be addressed. Climate change, economic collapse, over 150,000 coronavirus deaths in the US alone. Within our borders, we have 4% of the world's population and around 22% of the world's fatalities. This can't be anything other than an abject failure of our leadership. If we had competent leadership, it would never have gotten this far. Any leadership worth its salt would have listened to the experts, would have told us the truth no matter how it made them look, and would have immediately put a mask on, not because it was strictly necessary, but in order to lead by example. It is precisely because our leadership is either absent, narcissistic, or completely brain dead, sometimes all three, that I feel we are being called to lead ourselves. This is the way it always has been. This has always been the invitation. Since the beginning of time, however, there have been humans that want to control other humans. For too long, many of our various leaders have only purported to lead. They serve only themselves and not the populace. It is time for the populace to rise up and take their own power back. I am a writer, so my part of this mission is to write about it. Another part of my mission is to encourage it. Just think of it. If we were each focused on the higher good of all, 1% of people wouldn't control 80% of the wealth and resources in the world. If we each had true compassion for one another, racism, classism, ageism, and ableism would disappear overnight. Of course, this is a monumental Herculean task, yet I am doing what I can to make it happen. I don't propose to lead you anywhere except to yourself. I can do this because I have somehow taught myself to lead myself. I have learned to be my own person. More than once, I have pulled myself up by my own bootstraps enough times to know that I can do this. However, I do not pretend to have all the answers. I am not a guru, nor am I a teacher. I am merely a fellow traveler on this journey we call life. I am here to share teachings, ideas, and wisdom that may well help others along their own paths. This book is born out of a sense of service to the greater good of the world. An unusual name. This book of mine is to be called What Do the Flowers Say? Why is that? Flowers have always brought me joy. When I was a kid living in Southern California, we had geraniums by our front door, a spray of pink red, pink, and white. A red bottle brush tree grew at the back of the house, and a massive rosemary bush ran riot all along one side of our driveway. Near the front door, a honeysuckle grew inside and among the rosemary bush, creating a Gordian knot of horticulture. At some point, I learned that the blooms of the honeysuckle could be removed with ease. Pure bliss ensued when I discovered their inner stems were moist and sweet with nectar. And then there were the bees. Oh, there were bee friends all over the place back then. Now, you may have noticed from my name and picture that I'm white, and I'm American, sad as I am to admit this as of the time of this writing, which is in summer 2020. From what little you might know about me already, you might assume I'm a typical red-blooded American male. You might think I like cars, action movies, and football. You might think I eat red meat at every meal, that I have conservative views, and that I'm so unable to deal with my emotions that I kick the dog when I get home. Maybe I'm at least marginally racist, sexist, classist, or what have you. Maybe you assume I'm Catholic or at least Christian. You might think I love John Wayne, the Marlboro Man, and our sitting president, Donald J. Trump. I assure you, this could not be further from the truth. I like romantic comedies. I cry at the drop of a hat. I look forward to the next time I get to be vulnerable. And I'd like to think I'm at least one of the most tolerant people you'd ever meet. So what's the deal with the flowers? As I mentioned, I love flowers. Due to the way I was raised, it's my thinking that most red-blooded American males do not. There's a certain frisson or dissonance between the bulk of gun-toting, beer-swilling, NASCAR-loving, red-blooded American males that I ostensibly should be a part of, and me. That dissonance is part of what has brought me to where I am today. There are biological reasons for flowers to exist. For me, though, they exist for a singular purpose, and that is to bring us joy. Flowers silently bring us joy, and then they leave. They ask nothing in return. They do not need our involvement, strictly speaking. They do not need us. Put another way, flowers bring us joy and ask for nothing in return. Flowers bring us joy and ask for nothing in return. So I ask you, what higher love can there be? This is what the flowers say. The flowers bring us to love. And as Mr. Emerson said years ago, the earth laughs in flowers. Vinny.
Nice,
Beautifully
thank you.
said.
Mhm.
Beautiful.
That's
Thank
nice.
you. Thank
Yeah, it
you,
was nice.
Catherine. Thank you.
If you want to put things in the chat, especially whatever stuck with you, whatever was memorable, positive, had impact, you can put it in the chat or tell us straight up, verbally. Unmute yourself though, because people forget to. Do you know there's a board game in Target called You're on Mute? Okay, some people are saying, I love the reference to flowers, agreed, love the end, heartrending impact of the facts of your early life. I want to know more, beautifully formed and articulated, really nice comments, John. We'll have to share, save the chat. But it's important for writers. We all know the little thing that was clumsy. I'm sure you tripped over some sentence and thought, oh, I'll rewrite that, right, John? Because we all do that every time we read. So it's the things that you loved or that mattered or that stick with you that are news to us. And that is the gift you can give us, that information. Okay, so you can continue to comment for John. I'm going to go to our next reader, who is Leanne. John, mute yourselves as you are. And Leanne comes to us from a dance background. And so, of course, she's had an interesting pandemic. And so she says she runs a dance troupe, as a matter of fact. So this last 15 months has rolled into a unique period of reflection over my career as a choreographer and dancer, and to contemplation about the future of my chosen art form. So, many of us are multi-passionate. She comes to writing from dancing. Over the past 40 years, she's been researching, performing, and creating shows that present the richest of the world's folk and traditional dance and music. So what she's come to writing now is basically a part social commentary, all passion project, part memoir about folklore around the world, folkloric dance, and the impact it has on, or its echoes in our community, or its echoes in our society. I think that's a relatively good way of putting it, Leanne. I've heard you talk about it, but if I'm wrong, you can rephrase that. And I'm sure you will, because you're about to read some wonderful things for us. So thank you. I'm going to mute myself and give you the floor.
Okay, thank you so much, Julia, and for forcing me to do this. I am not as comfortable speaking in public as my sister is, who did a great job, but I will do my best. I'm writing a book called Embracism, which is about our journey through this whole thing, and this is my introduction to it. Dance has been a significant part of my entire life, and settling on world folk dance as an art form has really enriched my existence. I am proud of my contribution to the world through Vinok World Dance, a professional company in Edmonton that I started with my then partner, Doyle Marco. For a long time, I've wanted to document the history of the company, and it occurred to me that our own journey is more interesting in context of how it connects to world events and the evolution of folk dance over the past 40 years. My life has been very robust and eventful, and I have lived through many significant global changes. Some of them have been so gradual that we forget what life was like without them. This is particularly true of technology. For most of us, I think the rotary dial phone and manual typewriter seem like a completely different lifetime. There were other changes, for instance, the breakup of the Soviet Union and the war that divided Yugoslavia, that were dramatic at the time, but have since drifted to the recesses of most people's minds. Current events have had the most profound effect, particularly because they are so fresh, but also because they have personally affected us all. They were a reminder of how vulnerable we all are and how little control we may have. COVID-19 forced us all indoors to a place of reflection and solitude. However, there were other things that also forced significant contemplation. The George Floyd murder in the United States rekindled the Black Lives Matter movement globally. Here in Canada, we are reminded of the horrors of the residential school system as the unmarked graves of children torn from their families are continually discovered. As a very empathetic person, I have sensed that the isolation caused by COVID-19 has led some individuals to a very dark place with a negative energy. There appears to be a lot of indignation and criticism behind the veil of social media. There have been some that have questioned the appropriateness of what Vinok does, interpreting the dances and music of other countries. I have chosen to combat this by reminding myself that our art form is about healing and our divides and accentuating what makes us special. We perform dances that have been handed down to us through generations of dance teachers and choreographers from these countries. I was 5 years old when I wanted to become a dancer and was very excited to join my first Ukrainian dance class. Dance continued to be an integral part of my life, and after a year of computing science, my right brain won, and I went on to get my diploma in the art form. With little prospects for a professional career here in Edmonton, a worldwide search for opportunities ensued. A good friend offered a suggestion that led to Amsterdam, and I found myself dancing with the International Folklorische Danstheater, EFD so-called in the 1980s. However, the world that opened up to me was mind-blowing. As a dancer in Chetamwash Ukrainian Dance Ensemble, I knew that some of our dancers were not Ukrainian. Conversely, we had also worked with other dance groups, so the opportunity to learn about other cultures was always there. However, the concept of performing the dances of other cultures personally had never even occurred to me. When I went to Amsterdam, I felt this door open to a new world where I was invited in and given permission to participate. The experience was beyond anything I could imagine. It was educational, challenging, and fulfilling. In addition to working with the masters at the professional company, every weeknight there were 3 different locations that offered classes with instructors who had either emigrated from the country they were teaching the dances from or had spent extensive time studying there. We are blessed with an abundance of cultures in Edmonton and fortunate to live in a country that encourages and promotes the ability to retain and celebrate those cultures. There was a big difference in Amsterdam, though, particularly with the International Folklorische Danstheater. Foremost, they were a professional company, and secondly, the dancers performed all of the cultures and styles. For me, this was the perfect marriage of my burning aspiration to have a career as a dancer and my newfound love of world dance. That is what I wanted to do, and EFD became my ideal for what would eventually become Vinok World Dance. Doyle Marco and I had met in Chetamwash and had done this journey together from our days in the Grant MacEwan Dance program throughout our time in Amsterdam. We began to plan for starting our own company, and this led to a research tour of Eastern Europe in the late 1980s, which lasted about 21 months. We settled on the name Vinok during a fishing trip in Bulgaria and came home to start the company. A Vinok is a young unmarried woman's headpiece from central Ukraine. Although choosing a Ukrainian name has sometimes been confusing for others, it was symbolic for us. With colorful blossoms and bright ribbons, each flower was like a different culture, beautiful and dynamic on its own, but joined together formed a vibrant and inclusive bouquet. The sum of its parts woven together in a spectacular wreath were more striking because of the contrast and complement. At the time, diversity meant something totally different to me. It simply meant variety. It had nothing to do with the color of one's skin or the origin of one's race, but everything to do with the wealth of dance steps and styles, the incredible collection of beautiful melodies and exotic rhythms, the enthralling depth of different languages and their songs, and of course, the beautiful array of costumes. Each culture was not only so rich and different from each other, but often there were regional pockets that were totally unique to those surrounding them. It's really sad that systemic racism still exists, and I really have no idea how it feels to belong to a different race or religion that experiences the threat of prejudice, violence, and death, with which some of our fellow humans are indignified. However, as Ukrainians, we descend from ancestors who struggled under serfdom, were threatened with annihilation by Stalin, and were interned during the First World War here in Canada. I think we are able to express our compassion and empathy for those affected by racism, while still recognizing that the color of our skin may afford us certain advantages. So as I begin the book to document our origins, research, and journey, I explain the title. For me, Embracism is my word that describes my raison d'etre. It means that as we acknowledge and recognize our differences, we embrace them, we appreciate them, and we celebrate them. Whereas racism is about hatred and often violence, embracism is about love and sharing. If we could only get the rest of the world to buy in, we could create a beautiful place for us all to live. And I'm sorry for getting emotional. I knew I would.
No need to apologize for that. It's beautiful. I love Embracism. I think I heard it from you the first time about a year and a half ago. It stuck with me all this time. It's such a beautiful and simple turn on the stupidity of racism. When it's so easy to do. Yeah, it's wonderful, really is. I can't see your face, just your picture, but are you feeling a little better? Because you did great.
I don't know how that happened
You
because
can see
my
your
video.
gallery.
I'm having a crappy technology day because the sound isn't working and
Yeah, it was in the chat that we
If you
talked
go
about
to
it in the chat.
gallery, you can see her other picture. Leanne, that was awesome.
Was.
Shouldn't start out by comparing yourself to your sister because it's a totally different journey. And it's awesome that you're emotional because you are empathic and you're talking about something that's super relevant. And this year has been, really is time for everybody to take a different approach to our differences. So I thought you did a great job and I thought it was lovely.
thank you.
I think it's beautiful that you said that, that you came forward and said that much about it too, because I agree that was really wonderful. And I think the emotionality is, we were all feeling it. So it's heartfelt and, beautiful that you're there. Bad wording. So, but, but it's great. It's wonderful. Thank you very much. You can continue to give Leanne comments in the chat. Anything you want to say, Leanne? Of course, oh, you're not muted. Are you muted? Yes, you are. Okay, I'm going to move on to Catherine. I think the connection between dance and Embracism is a really beautiful connection. Okay, our next guest is Kathy Butterfield, or Catherine Butterfield, and she is writing an epic memoir called An Ordinary Family. And she's going to be reading from us today. And Catherine was also in the class about a year ago and comes back now after really writing a lot, thinking a lot, struggling a lot. I honor that you're back and ready to read something from the chapter on Georgia, as she tells us. So I'm going to cede the floor to Kathy, and can't wait to hear. You're muted, Kathy.
How's that? Better? Okay. You can hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, I was muted. Sorry, but yes, we can hear you.
All right. This is from a multi-generational memoir. Okay. Grammy told me stories often, sometimes as she rubbed my back and I lay in her lap. Stories of her youth and courtship, her wedding night, and all sorts of things from the wonderful world of the past before electricity and running water, when folks lived from the land and were one with the earth. She met my grandpa, Manuel Lee Smith, when he returned from the Spanish-American War. She was sitting in a peach tree looking down the holler when she saw Manuel Lee trudging up the hill, back straight and tall, stepping through the spring grass. She scurried down the tree and ran up to the porch where her mother sat, paring apples on a bench. Her mother hummed softly a tune passed down through the ages. Ethel straightened her skirt upon her lap and sat tall next to her mother about 10 inches away. Manuel proceeded up the hill to the porch, tipped his hat to Mrs. Pless, and cast an eye towards Ethel. I pictured it going like this. The 6-foot-tall, blue-eyed, black-haired world traveler and Army veteran said, "Morning, Miss Pless. I thought I'd call to see how you doing up here." My protective, cautious great-grandma answered, "Pleasant morning to you, Mr. Smith. All is well here. You done with the war?" "Yes'm. Army let me go." "You been far?" "Yes'm. New York, Oswego, and the Philippine Islands." "My, that's a far piece." I could see him chuckle modestly. "Yes'm, sure is." I pictured my 14 going on 15 Ethel following the conversation with her eyes. She held her breath when he said Oswego and islands, and she blushed for no reason. "Your children done grown an awful lot. Who be this?" "Why, Mr. Smith, you know full well it's Ethel." "Tag nabbit, I thought 'twas her sister. Ethel was a mite of a thing when I left." "Her sister's gone and married with a child down to Cherry Log." "Well, I'll be." As Grammy recounted their meeting and courtship, I saw him tip his hat again to Ethel, take it off and set it upon his knee, as one foot was now on a step while the other remained on the ground. "It's a pleasure to see you, Ethel, all growed up like your sister was." I could see her setting up straight and looking at him directly in the eye, mustering her manners and saying, "Thank you kindly, Mr. Smith. We're glad you have returned without injury." While her soothing voice told me this, she sounded so grown up, even to her own ears. I was drifting off to sleep, my head in her lap, and I saw my young grandpa Manuel laughing gently and smiling while he brushed back his hair. "So am I, Miss Pless." "Is your daddy about?" "He's at the forge helping Mr. Thaddeus Clark." "Well, good day, ladies. I reckon I'll stop by and see him." "Good day," the ladies echoed, and I drifted into sleep. Grammy stroked my hair as I lay in her lap. Ethel was full grown with brown eyes and dark hair. She stood only 5'2" tall and was trim and ready for romance. She didn't want to tell her mama how handsome she thought he was or how charming. He'd been off to war, the Spanish-American War. Who can remember how long? Her mama said, "He must be 30 years old now and ain't got married yet." "Well, how could he, Mama? He was at war." Grandpa told me he took a job at the forge. Mr. Pless returned to his farm in the holler. Manuel didn't go to church on Sundays. People talked. Mr. Clark would raise his voice over the fire in the forge as they shaped nails and horseshoes and rigging, and he'd shout at Manuel, "You been saved yet? You see those fires? You see those fires, Manuel? The fires of hell is hotter than that. 10 times hotter, 1,000 times hotter. You're gonna burn in hell, Manuel, if you don't go to church and get saved. Oh, hogwash, that just ain't so, Mr. Clark. It ain't so. Grampy always made it clear that he had no truck with religion. Ethel went to Charilog every chance she got to visit her sister and help her with the chores and baby. Manuel spied her each time she passed the forge. She didn't have to go that way, but she did. By and by, they met at her sister's on the back stoop, where he pledged his love to her and asked her to marry him. She daren't tell her folks, as she knew they'd deny her the privilege of happiness because they thought her still a child. She was the only girl left to help Mama on the little farm in the holler, and they intended to keep her as long as they could, till she was 16 at least. Her married sister in the tiny town thought otherwise. She saw the truth in their eyes. It was she who hatched a plan to help Ethel and Manuel, the handsome 30-year-old soldier back from the war, elope, and they did. They went to Atlanta on a train that stopped in Charilog on the way to Ellijay, and then on to other parts, and then to Atlanta. Manuel knew the train because the army had sent him on it to and from the war. They found a preacher in Ellijay to marry them, and then passed on to a hotel in Atlanta for their honeymoon. What are you talking about, Manuel Lee Smith? People don't do that. That's just for barnyard animals. Oh, Ethel, now, don't be that way. How do you think babies come? Well, you know as well as I do the stork brings them. They slept in the same bed, as she knew that married folks did, and he held her hand and kissed her cheek and said goodnight. All right, Ethel, we'll wait until you ask your mama, and they fell asleep. In the morning, as they were setting out to return to Charilog, the hotel maid came in. She spied this tall man was a girl child, and she set upon him with her broom. Yo, get away from that child. I'm fixing to call the police. And she set all her heavy black frame against the tall white man and threatened him to protect the child. Manuel Lee raised up his hands to protect himself, but spoke softly to her. Now, woman, settle down. This here's my wife. Ethel took hold the broom handle gently in her hands and helped the housekeeper and protector lower it from Manuel's head. It's true, ma'am. We done married yesterday up to Ellijay. I got the paper here in my case. The woman harumphed, cleared her throat, pulled down her bodice and stroked her apron. He don't hurt you none? No, ma'am. He ain't touched me. We going home to my mama to find out what married folks are supposed to do. Go on now, child. And you, she pointed her strong finger at his face, you take care of this girl, you hear? Yes, ma'am, I intend to. Grandma laughed as she told this story. Her memory was strong. She told me to let me know how innocent she was and how gentle was Grandpa. When Manuel and Ethel returned, Mama explained the ways of the world, and to her surprise, daughter, and told her of her wifely duties to her husband. Ethel complied. She turned 15 when they wed. Her firstborn, Arvin, was in the cradle when she was 16.
That was just wonderful. So much vivid imagery and so many great dialects, or I don't know if it's a dialect or just, voices, and so much good point of view. We'll go home and talk to, we'll wait till you talk to your mama.
I love that you gave a voice to history by putting characters and actual people in there in your memoir. That's instead of just relating facts. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I also, and Susan made this point in the chat, I was thinking the same thing, how far we've come in 5 readings in terms of just variety.
Yeah.
Right. We have 2 more. We have somebody in the waiting room. We have 2 more, but let's just give our friend Kathy 1 more minute of people who want to say anything else to her before we move on. Okay. I thought it was wonderful. I'm sure a lot of people did, and they're just holding back a little bit, but it's also showing up in the chat, the lines that people loved and the points of view that came through. Okay, I am going to move on to our friend Martha Rand, who has been appreciating everybody's chat, everything that the people are saying in the chat. Very interactive about commenting on what writers are saying. So well written and things like that. Okay, so Martha works at the Renaissance Fair every summer for about 2 months out of the year. She does tarot readings and has been doing tarot readings and astrology since she was a teenager. And she was in this class with us, Creative Mastery course, about a year ago and has been working diligently since then. I can't tell you what an honor it is when somebody's been working for as long as that on a project with me and is happy and willing to come back and read with us, because it just speaks volumes to where you think you are and what you think you can do and what it matters to you, what you're willing to put on the line to read something you've written. So Martha is going to read to us an excerpt from the book she's writing called The Tarot Reader. And I can't wait to hear it. I'm going to mute myself and cede the floor, Martha.
Thank you, Julia. Elaney pulled his significator out of the deck. King of Wands. He wanted to know about business. Wands would do. Wands could represent aspirations and ambitions. It came out of the deck upside down. Appropriate, she thought. Something is not going right. She righted the card. This represents you. She had Morris's attention. With each card she took from the top of the pile, she chanted her usual beginning for a reading. This is what covers, what challenges, the past and the future. He was watching her hands turning over card after card, one by one. She continued, the unconscious and the conscious. This is you, your house, your hopes and fears, and the outcome. The Ace of Pentacles was the outcome, his destiny. Character's destiny, she'd heard Aunt Gemma say, and she could tell already that his character was basically good. Elaney lifted the challenge card that she had placed like a cross in the center, revealing the Eight of Swords, a picture of a woman blindfolded and bound. 8 swords stuck in the swampy earth with a gray castle in the background. This is a difficult situation for your business, but you are about to come to a decision. You won't be in this uncomfortable, stuck place for too much longer. Certainly within the year, perhaps soon in this year, you'll find a solution. I know you keep your hopes high. Don't get discouraged. You have the Ace of Pentacles as an outcome. Things will go well. She replaced the challenge card, covering up the woman who had been ensnared and held hostage with the 2 of Swords. This is a card of choice. Elaney gracefully turned her hand toward the challenge card to redirect his attention. You see, she is blindfolded and holding a sword in each hand. The moon is above her. You've never had to make a choice like this before, and of course you don't know what the outcome will be. You'll have to make your choice blindly with faith. She stopped the reading and her eyes sought out his. Is this making sense to you? She asked. He found her eye contact startling. It was both disconcerting and agreeable at the same time. Not many people looked him in the eye that way. Certainly not his son, who wanted the business he'd built and whose salary he paid. That was the choice. He knew it in his heart, to leave the business, to sell it and make a profit, or see his son abuse it like he abused all the privileges Morris had tried to bestow. Yes, it makes sense, Morris stuttered. Good. I just wanted to make sure we were on the same wavelength and that this reading is meant for you. Elaney turned her attention back to the cards. Morris didn't know what to say. What could she mean by that? Who else could the reading be meant for? Never in his life had he been to a fortune teller, a spiritualist. He was surprised he'd come now. He didn't believe. He was a self-made man, first generation from a family of Jewish atheists. How could a Jew from a family who remembered firsthand pogroms and the ill will of prejudice that left the psyche scarred with darkness and paranoia be anything but? What kind of a God would let a Holocaust decimate a family? There was no God. Culturally, he was a Jew, but faith. There was only faith in oneself, nothing higher. Eleni assessed the next 4 cards. They formed the cross around the central 3, the significator, the covering card, and the challenge. Above and below, the conscious and the unconscious. Which would she talk about next? The conscious and the unconscious were positive cards. She'd interpret them. The 6 of Cups, she began. You want to be generous in this situation, but you must think of yourself. She pointed to the sun, the card in the conscious position at the top of the cross. You're ready to move into a new phase of your life. You need to provide for yourself. This is a major arcana card. It speaks to something about who you are and what your core tasks are in this lifetime. You have to provide for yourself, depend on yourself. This is what you do. This is who you are. Morris felt his mind focused on the images and the sound of her voice. It was like the sound of the sirens that drew Odysseus in and deterred him from his purpose. Yet here he was, focused on finding out what his purpose, his fate, so to speak, was going to be. He was enjoying sitting in this young woman's home, listening to her voice, telling his story. It was pleasurable and entrancing. Eleni observed Morris's head nodding just slightly, almost imperceptibly. Her fine-tuned observation, a key component to what others called intuition, had kicked into high gear. She could feel the energy buzzing through her. There was an urgency at that very moment to deliver the message she was reading from the cards to her client, the kind and gentle man who sat next to her at the curve of the dining room table. Okay, now here's what's difficult. This is the situation and the choices for your action. I can only illuminate the possibilities for you. I can't make your decision. You understand that. He nodded dreamily at first until he took in the full import of what she was saying. Of course, I make my own decisions. I've always made my own decisions. Go on. I'm concerned about the 8 of Pentacles. You see, it's reversed. She said it as a question. He looked closely at the card. A craftsman was hammering at something on a bench. The craftsman looked like a diligent, hard worker. The card was upside down. Someone in your business, she thought about using the word betray. That was her sense, but the word sounded harsh. Morris was being betrayed by someone who worked for him. She didn't want to alarm him, but this was the message. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. That was strong. That was powerful. The characters were great. They were really nicely defined. It was, when he came back angrily, of course I make my own decisions. Anybody else want to give Martha feedback on what they heard, what they liked? Also, I don't know anything about tarot that much, so as Adam says, a great window into the process, which is nice too. You really brought us all into that without, assuming we knew. You're watching the chat, maybe. You're muted, Catherine, but please speak.
I like the tension between the characters,
Mhm.
the belief and the non-belief, the hesitancy of the reader to tell the full truth. Yeah.
Again, incredible variety we've had from these 6 readers so far. And a little bit more for Martha before we go on, and you can continue to put things in the chat for her. Okay. Diane says, I found myself smiling a lot. Yes, I agree with that. It was really nice, really nice. Okay, so I am our last reader. My student said to me,
You're muted.
lucky, because I was just saying self-debasing things. it is time for me to be the reader. And I have to admit, my students, my clients said to me, you be the 7th. And I thought, I can't think of a good reason why I shouldn't do that. But it is good once in a while to put myself in the same sort of uncomfortable, out of your comfort zone, push yourself to be to do something that maybe you don't feel like you're ready to do. So here I am reading from my novel that I'm just in the middle of writing. That is, it is still a bad novel, I will admit, but I have worked on the intro and I think it's enjoyable. It is called Crushing Debt, Reality Sucks. So it is the first 1,400 words of the novel. Okay, so I will begin. It was still dark when the baby woke her. She reached over to snuggle her in as she undid her bra and shirt inside the sleeping bag. In the dim light of the street lamp, Darby saw Ava latch on and smile up at her impishly, as if to announce Darby's next sensation. Sorry, waiting. Whoa, baby girl, Darby said. You got a pants load, whew. She waved off the stink even as she leaned up on an elbow to reach for the diaper bag. And while she had her butt off the ground, she pulled her phone from her back pocket. 4:43 a.m. I guess this day is getting started, Darby said. One thing at a time, she coaxed her little eager mouth off the breast long enough to clean her up. Ava fussed, but then made happier noises as her bitty butt was clean and re-diapered. I never thought I'd be here. We'd be here, Darby thought. Never thought I'd be raising a baby on the streets of LA. Her brow furrowed as her young face went dark. Ava's fretting smoothed to coos and laughs, and Darby's anxious thoughts also disappeared, and she returned her daughter's smile. That's better. Now mommy needs to pee, and then we can get back to breakfast. Her breasts were full, her right boob still loose under the unbuttoned shirt. Ava was adept. She rooted around with her hands to line up the breast and get back to nursing. Come on, give me a minute, Darby said, coming to a stand. She ducked under the canvas flap quietly and left the tent. It was going to be hot, they said, but right now it was chilly and gray. There was no sign of the brutal LA sun. The air was crisp and cool, and it was quiet all around them. She headed to the porta potty up under the overpass that they all used. They were lucky to have it. She hated taking Ava in there, though, tight quarters for the two of them. So she copped a squat next to the cement abutment and let it flow out downhill between her legs. She was getting good at this. Her red flip-flop stayed dry. It was a long pee, so she let Ava, ever impatient, latch on again. Hungry, huh? Me too, Darby said to Ava. It would be hours before Darby scraped some breakfast for herself from somewhere. God, what would my mom think? Darby pondered aloud as she stood and refastened her jeans. And what would she think? Here was her beautiful daughter of 26 years squatting in Hollywood with a baby, her grandchild. If she could be in the moment with Darby and Ava, she might appreciate the details, how strong Darby looked. She was thinner and calm, despite circumstances that would have made anyone else in her Atlanta suburb very anxious. Her thick brunette hair had grown out of its chic style, and her bedhead was now days old. Her nails were clean, if unmanicured. Her jeans and shirt were dirty, but the cute blanket that cradled Ava was brand new. She might have noticed how much the two of them looked alike, especially around the eyes, merry and intelligent, and she might have seen how much drive the baby gave the mother. Cut, yelled a producer from the small, sleepy clutch of crew who had roused themselves to follow Darby around and film. Jesus, now what? Asked Clint, the cameraman. You really think they're going to let us use footage of a breastfeeding mom squatting to urinate in public? Wanda asked. You don't know. That's up to Mercy. Let's just get it in the can, he said. Mercedes was the showrunner and not usually opposed to controversy. Leave her alone. Let's go get breakfast, Wanda said. Rap on, Darby, she called. The cameraman, lighting guy, and the intern headed toward the breakfast tent. Darb, don't give them stuff they can use on the internet, Wanda warned. But my contract says no nudity, said Darby. Yeah, but you agreed to breastfeeding footage. Besides, stuff leaks. Look at those bozos. Don't you think they'd sell to TMZ or worse, some peeing porn site if they could make a little extra cash? Wanda turned away, shaking her head, and then turned back. Hey, can we do a confessional in about an hour? At the overturned trash can, asked Darby. Yeah, we'll meet there. I can take the baby, and we can get your thoughts on tomorrow's panhandling challenge. Do you think the baby will give you an unfair advantage or not? Darby started to answer. Hold that thought, the young producer said, smiling. Wanda walked off, hurrying to catch up. Darby watched, yearning, as the crew went off to craft services table for coffee, Danish, and scrambled eggs. She could smell it all. The challenge. Bethy was standing in her walk-in closet, choosing accessories, though it was still dark out. She had to be on set by 6:15. Still, it felt sunny in there because the lights were set on daylight. She assessed her outfit in the three-way mirror and then checked it on the TV monitor. Full body, then close up. After a minute's thought, she switched out the Michael Kors scarf for a David Yurman disc pendant. It was going to be hot, and she hated to alter her outfit midday. She wasn't the type to wing it later, take off the scarf or pull up her hair. No matter how hot this August day got, Bethy would look exactly this put together all day long. People admired her for it. It was her straight-laced and sensible style that earned her the nickname America's Big Sister. She wouldn't consider it wise to put such admiration at risk. The entertainment press could ruin you. She'd seen it happen, or they could humiliate you. Bethy imagined the headline, Bethy Hart had toilet paper on her shoe and no one even told her. It could happen. She checked her shoe, a petite tan leather loafer, just in case. She adjusted her nude socklet so it wouldn't show at the heel. They were at the start of the new season, 16th, she thought with pride. Bethy returned to her close-up cam. She saw the small thrill pass across her face. She shook her shoulders and let herself feel the excitement. Hollywood still got to her. The phone rang. Her co-host, Ken Hansen's face now replaced hers on the video monitor. You ready for this? Ken asked. Here we go. Another riveting season of, Ken paused for effect, framing his words in the air, crushing debt. The game show that teaches everyone to live within their means. Yes, but I still have to study the contestants' financial profiles before we get on air, Bethy fretted. 10 of them, one of me. My mind is not as sharp as it used to be. We're young, Ken said, interrupting. 45 is the new 25 for the wealthy. You worry too much. Wait, lean into the monitor? Bethy obliged, leaning in. Is there a wrinkle on your brow? Better get into Botox, Ken scolded. What? Bethy panicked, looking at the magnifying mirror. Made you look, Ken laughed. Oh, stop, she smiled. I'll see you soon. Bethy Hart understood her responsibility as a TV host. She represented the show and the American Dream Network everywhere she went. And yes, so did her 3 kids. They went to the best private schools and dressed as the inheritors to the throne of power and money, as did all their friends. As her 3 teenage children slept, she stepped out, locked the front door, and checked it. She passed her late mother's Ford F-150 pickup truck circa 1984. It was the truck Bethy had driven here from Nebraska with all her belongings in the back and 3 small kids in the bench seat up front with her. She left her husband behind like an unwanted Ken doll on the floor of the playroom. This would be the adventure of her life. Marriage had seemed empty and plastic. The sun was coming up. The skies were already that gobsmacking blue that almost embarrassed her. What had they done to deserve such sunny skies and fair weather? Even after 8 years in LA, she remembered real weather and real life. Real life was where their reality show contestants would come from. Middle America, where regular people were living their lives in ordinary houses with ordinary jobs, just trying to make ends meet. Her phone buzzed. Well, that didn't take long, she thought, grabbing it. This time, though, it wasn't Ken. It was Mercy, her producer. Good morning, Bethy began pleasantly. How are you? Don't look at Twitter, Mercy said, and hung up. That's it. So.
That was just fabulous.
That was good.
The juxtaposition of the different people and oh wow.
Thank you.
It's really fun. It's
Thank
you got great voices going on there, and I finally quieted down enough that I could actually talk on here. So sorry, guys. It's good to see everybody and hear everybody. So.
Okay, so what you can tell me what stuck out, what was memorable, what was in the chat, or if you want to hop on verbally, you can do that too. Oh, Tiff is in the waiting room this time. I can only do so much at once. Okay. Well, that concludes our 7 readers. And what a fun time it was. I'm amazed always by the 7 fertile minds that churn out such different views of the world, such different voices. Yeah. So, okay. And if you want to say
I thought it
goodbye
was interesting, Julia, that one of the comments was how well you curated this. And I think it would be interesting for people to know that it's rather random. I mean, we don't read to each other before this. So it's just what it is and turns out like great.
This one happened to be a little bit more curated because 3 of you were from a year ago. So I did know a little bit about your topics at least. And
Sorry.
you know, your voices. But yeah, mostly you're right. It's fairly random. I think when you put 7 writers in a room, you're going to have an interesting dialogue. Because we are the weirdos and the witnesses of the world. Well, okay. So unless there's further comment on anybody or on any of it, I will, you know, call it a day. We ran a little long as it is. I want to thank everybody for coming. It was, it's always, we had at 1.65 people. It is always a lovely thing to know that people care about what we're doing and what we're writing. Isn't that like a great?
Thank you for doing this, Julia.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
you're
thank
always
you
I,
very
I
much.
was on the beach. I was on the beach when I remembered. I was literally walking on the beach and I said, oh my God, I was supposed to log on and hear you guys. Oh, so I was at the beach. I'm so excited. I heard it.
This was well done. A lot of people are also very good narrators as well as writers.
It is hard to read your
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, you trip over your words or. Thank you. Tiff Holland just got here. She's one of our
I just want to
writers.
say I appreciate
Susan, go ahead. Susan? Oh. I'm frozen.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm back.
Great.
Great. Thank you, everybody. I was frozen for a minute. I thought, well, that's the end of that. These things end.
Thank you, everybody, for staying.
Yeah. Yeah. You do lose people over the hour, but that's how it is. Okay. I'm going to try and cut and paste the chat for those of you who read. I'll see if I can get it all in a Word document or something. I've never done that before, but it shouldn't be that hard.
And if
Right?
not,
That's-
I think I can save it and send it to you. So we'll see what happens.
This is my mantra every day. I have no idea how to do that, but I'm sure it'll be fine. I've been writing this book, somebody asked, probably 3 years, but a lot lately. Well, I've been much more focused on it lately. Yeah, I'm just trying to cut and paste the chat. You don't have to sit around and watch me do that.
Thanks very much, everyone. Sorry,
Thanks,
I'm sorry I had technical difficulties.
I'm glad you were here. It was great. I loved your piece.
Everyone did such a wonderful job. It was great to hear the variety.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye for now.
And I'm so glad you did it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's always a little arm twisting to get anybody to do this, including myself. I'm just trying to, I'm just cutting and pasting. Bye, Mark. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.
See if I can get that in a Word document. Yep, it's all in a Word document, so we have it. I didn't even get a chance to read mine, so I'm glad. Okay.
I just want to apologize again. I feel so bad that I just saw this.
Oh, I saw that you came in. I thought, oh, that's kind of exciting, but I had just read, I was the last reader. But it'll be recorded. It is recorded. I'll put it up in various places, but it is an hour and a half long. But it's nice. It's so nice that you're here. The variety of 7 readers is a lot. So there was a lot of
Yeah.
richness in the hour. Yeah.
Yeah, my small plumbing thing today ended up being a large plumbing thing out in the rain with me helping the plumber.
God, I know that feeling of things going awry. Okay, well, I'm gonna end the meeting and go to the bathroom, quite frankly.
I'll send you the rest of the tips.
Okay, good. I'm working on it's 10 sets so I'm working on getting them all automated, so I'll be glad to have them. Okay, talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.